At exactly 22:17 hours on March 31st, 2026, the false calm over southwestern Iran was shattered. An F-15E Strike Eagle, call sign Viper 3-1, was executing a night suppression of enemy air defenses mission over the Zagros foothills, approximately 140 kilometers south of Isfahan. The aircraft, assigned to the 492nd Fighter Squadron out of Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, carried a loadout of 4 AGM-88E advanced anti-radiation guided missiles, 2 GBU-54 laser-guided bombs, and a full complement of AIM-120D AMRAAMs for self-defense. The mission had been running clean for 11 minutes. Then, in an instant, Viper 3-1 was gone. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Air Defense Force, the IRGC, had spent 3 weeks building a deception. What appeared on American ANTPY-2 forward-based radar as a single Tor M1 short-range system was, in fact, a layered ambush. The Iranians had exploited the electromagnetic terrain of the Zagros ridgelines to mask 2 mobile S-300 PMU-2 batteries from USRC-135VW Rivet Joint Electronic Intelligence aircraft. Using a technique derived from Russian electronic warfare doctrine, the same doctrine that Russian advisors had been feeding Tehran's missile defense crews since the conflict began, the IRGC had operated in near-total electromagnetic silence for 72 hours, denying American SIGINT platforms any telltale radar emission signatures. At 2217:04, the S-300 fire control radar activated for precisely 4 seconds. 4 seconds. Just long enough to acquire, track, lock, and fire 2 48 and 63 missiles. The F-15E's ALQ-135 internal countermeasures system activated automatically, releasing chaff and executing a 9G brake turn. 1 missile was defeated. The second was not. The 150-kilogram proximity-fused warhead detonated 8 meters off the left engine nacelle, sending shrapnel through the fuel system and destroying the left stabilizer. Viper 3-1 began an uncontrolled roll. The 2-man crew, the pilot, a USAF colonel whose identity remains classified, and his weapons systems officer, ejected at approximately 7,200 feet over hostile terrain. The colonel sustained injuries consistent with a high-speed ejection. The WSO was killed when his chute malfunctioned over the rocky terrain below. He was the first confirmed American KIA of the conflict. What happened next would become the most closely watched 48 hours in American Special Operations history. At 22:31 hours, 14 minutes after the shootdown, the Joint Personnel Recovery Center at Al Udeid received Viper 3-1's emergency beacon signal. The PLB, Personal Locator Beacon, was transmitting on the 406 MHz CUSP-SAR-SAT frequency, encrypted with the pilot's unique code. Simultaneously, the downed colonel activated his PRC-149 survival radio and made brief, coded contact using quick frequency hopping protocols that denied Iranian direction-finding equipment a clean intercept window. But the Iranians knew the approximate location, and they were already moving. IRGC ground forces QRF units, quick reaction forces, mounted on Toyota Hilux Technicals and Russian-supplied GAZ Tiger light tactical vehicles, were rolling within 22 minutes of the shootdown. Iranian signals intelligence assets, trained by Russian GRU specialists over the preceding months, were attempting to triangulate the PLB signal. The window for successful personnel recovery was compressing fast. At 22:47 hours, Joint Special Operations Command activated its most sensitive asset package. 2 Sikorsky MH-60M Black Hawks from the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the Night Stalkers, were already airborne out of a classified forward staging base in northern Iraq. They carried 42 Special Operations personnel, a composite team of 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta operators, members of SEAL Team 6's Black Squadron, and a combat controller from the 24th Special Tactics Squadron, equipped with a SOFLAM ANPEQ-1 laser designator. Supporting their info route were two MC-130J Commando II tanker aircraft for emergency air refueling, and a single MQ-9B Sky Guardian remotely piloted aircraft operating at 38,000 feet, feeding full-motion infrared video directly to the JPRC Battle Watch floor and to the National Military Command Center in Washington. The mission profile was classified under the most restrictive handling caveat in U.S. military code. SAP-SI, Special Access Program/Special Intelligence. No communication with conventional forces. No coordination with regional allies. This was a unilateral operation being run directly from JSOC Forward Headquarters. At the same time, in the Indian Ocean, approximately 40 nautical miles south of Gala, Sri Lanka, a completely separate engagement was unfolding. The Iranian Navy frigate Iris Dina, a 1,500-ton Mauj-class warship, had been transiting back toward Iran following its participation in the multilateral exercise Milan at Vishakhapatnam, India. U.S. naval intelligence had been tracking the Dina for 3 weeks, noting its anomalous communication patterns and what SIGINT analysts assessed as encrypted data burst transmissions consistent with targeting data relay, feeding real-time intelligence on U.S. carrier strike group movements to the IRGC Navy in the Persian Gulf. At 22:04 hours, 13 minutes before Viper 3-1 was hit, the USS Charlotte, a Virginia-class fast attack submarine operating in the Indian Ocean at a classified depth, received a precedence flash tasking order transmitted via the ELF, extremely low-frequency communication system. The order authorized a Mk-48 ADCAP heavyweight torpedo engagement. The Charlotte's crew had been in weapons-free status for 11 hours. The boat's spherical array sonar had held the Dina's acoustic signature, a distinctive cavitation pattern from her partially degraded propeller shaft, a flaw Iranian Navy maintenance had never corrected, for 6 hours across 40 nautical miles of increasingly shallow Indian Ocean water. At 22:19 hours, two Mk-48 ADCAP Mod 7 torpedoes left the Charlotte's tubes. The Dina had no warning. Her hull was not equipped with towed array sonar. She had no means to detect a modern American submarine. The first torpedo struck amidships, penetrating the waterline and detonating in the engineering spaces. The second struck the bow. The Iris Dina sank in 11 minutes. The U.S. government would not publicly confirm the engagement for 72 hours. Iran denied the loss for 4 days. Satellite imagery told the truth. Back over southwestern Iran, the clock was running out for the downed colonel. At 43 hours on April 1st, 86 minutes after the shootdown, the lead MH-60M crossed the Iranian border at low level, navigating the ridgeline terrain of the Zagros Mountains at 90 feet AGL, using terrain masking to defeat Iranian low-altitude radar coverage. The night stalkers were flying on AN/AVS 9 Generation 4+ night vision goggles, maintaining strict EMCON, emissions control discipline. No active radar, no IFF transponder, no radio transmissions except prearranged burst codes. The MQ-9B overhead had already identified 3 IRGC search teams converging on the colonel's position from the northeast, southwest, and due south. The Delta operators in the lead aircraft had 11 minutes before the nearest Iranian QRF element, estimated at 42 personnel mounted in 8 vehicles, would reach the pilot's concealed position in a dry wadi approximately 3 kilometers east of the town of Semiram. At 51 hours, the lead MH-60M touched down in a cloud of talc-fine dust on a flat shelf of rock 400 meters from the pilot's beacon. The Delta team was off the helicopter in 4 seconds. They moved in 2 5-man elements, clearing their approach lanes with suppressed HK-416A5 carbines mounted with ANPEQ-15 laser aiming systems. The pilot was found in the wadi conscious, with a fractured left fibula and a shrapnel laceration to his right shoulder. At 58 hours, with the nearest IRGC element now 6 minutes out, the combat controller designated a target package for the supporting AC-130J Ghostwriter gunship that had been holding in an orbit at 18,000 feet, 20 miles to the west. The Ghostwriter's 30 ATK cannon and 105 howitzer suppressed the lead IRGC vehicle column with precision fire, destroying the first 2 vehicles in the convoy and halting the advance in the terrain choke point of a narrow mountain road. The Iranians radioed for helicopter support. Iranian Mi-171 transport helicopters scrambled from Sharacord Air Base. They were detected immediately by the E-3C Sentry AWACS aircraft operating in Iraqi airspace, which passed targeting data to 2 F-22A Raptors from the 95th Fighter Squadron, flying a combat air patrol barrier at the Iranian border. The Raptors were authorized to engage any Iranian military aircraft that crossed a designated exclusion boundary. The Iranian Mi-171s never reached it. Their crew commanders, apparently briefed on the F-22's capabilities, turned back 40 kilometers short of the boundary. At 1:04 hours, Viper 31's pilot was loaded onto the lead MH-60M. The exfil lasted 9 minutes. Both helicopters crossed back into Iraqi airspace at 1:13 hours. The pilot was transferred to a USAF C-17 Globemaster medevac configuration and was in surgery at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany 14 hours later. President Trump announced the successful rescue at 2300 hours Washington time on April 1st, calling it a perfectly executed American mission. But the mission's success masked a far darker strategic reality that no press conference addressed. While Delta Force was recovering the colonel, a ballistic missile launched from Iranian territory crossed into Turkish airspace. NATO's integrated air defense, with Turkey's Hisar plus medium-range missile system providing terminal defense, intercepted the warhead over Derdial in Hatay province. Turkey exercised Article 5 consultations with NATO headquarters in Brussels. NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte confirmed the alliance's commitment to Turkey's defense. The Russian and Iranian foreign ministers held a phone call within hours, with Tehran describing U.S. threats to Iranian energy infrastructure as a war crime in preparation. The Strait of Hormuz remained closed. 20% of global oil transit, approximately 21 million barrels per day, was rerouted at extraordinary cost through alternative pipelines or held in tankers at anchor in the Gulf of Oman. At the UN Security Council, Secretary-General Guterres delivered an address that used a phrase no sitting UN chief had employed since the Cuban Missile Crisis: the edge of a wider war. Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, who assumed power following the U.S. Israeli airstrike that killed his father on February 28, issued a public statement vowing that his forces were not deterred by assassinations. The IRGC's intelligence chief, Gen Majid Kademi, had been killed in a targeted strike just days earlier, making Khamenei's statement less a declaration of strength than an acknowledgement of continued hemorrhage at the top of Iran's command structure. On day 38 of the conflict, April 6, 2026, President Trump held a press conference flanked by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs General Dan Kane, and CIA Director John Ratcliffe. He called Iran an active, willing participant in negotiations while simultaneously refusing to say whether the war was escalating or de-escalating. Iran rejected a 45-day ceasefire proposal. A senior Iranian security source told state media that Trump's military failure at southern Isfahan represented a strategic defeat, a reference to a multi-aircraft strike package that had failed to destroy a hardened IRGC missile production facility buried beneath 30 meters of reinforced concrete. Iran's point was not entirely without merit. The facility survived. The missiles being manufactured inside it did not stop. The lesson the world was absorbing in the spring of 2026 was one written not in peace treaties but in wreckage. The wreckage of a Mauj-class frigate at the bottom of the Indian Ocean, the wreckage of an F-15E in the Zagros Mountains, the wreckage of Iranian air defense radar arrays along the Alborz ridge lines, and the wreckage of the assumption that this conflict could be contained to a 2-week air campaign and a favorable phone call. The 160th SOAR flew their night Stalkers back through the dark. The USS Charlotte went deep and ran silent. The Strait of Hormuz stayed closed. And in the combat information centers of 24 warships threading the Persian Gulf, the same Aegis fire control radars that had spent decades practicing for this moment were now living it, hour by hour, alert cycle by alert cycle, with no clear exit in sight. America had demonstrated without question that it could reach into the heart of Iran and extract its people. What it had not yet demonstrated, and what kept every flag officer in the theater awake, was how to end a war against an adversary that had spent 45 years preparing to absorb exactly this kind of punishment and keep fighting. The downed pilot was safe. The war was not. What would you do? If you were in the White House Situation Room on the night of April 1st, with Delta Force boots on Iranian soil, an Iranian ballistic missile crossing NATO airspace, and the Strait of Hormuz sealed like a fist, would you push for a ceasefire, or would you order the next strike package? Comment 1 for escalate. Comment 2 for negotiate. Because the clock is ticking, and in this theater, every hour of indecision costs someone their life. Stay sharp. Stay informed. And remember, wars that begin with airstrikes do not end with airstrikes. They end with choices, and right now, the choices being made in Tehran, Washington, and Brussels will define the next decade of global order. The world is watching. The question is whether anyone is listening.